This isn't a major outbreak, but there is some potential for severe weather this week. Here's what you need to know. All right, so what I'm sharing here is the Storm Prediction Center's convective outlooks. So what I'm first going to do is show you the day three, which day three, just so you know, is from 7 a.m. on Tuesday, March 31st to 7 a.m. Central Time on Wednesday, April 1st. So what you can see here, they have in the light green just general thunderstorm chances. The dark green, that's a marginal level 1 risk. And you can see two areas. This is a much broader level 1 risk up here in the Great Lakes region. You have a little one down in Oklahoma, Kansas, and Texas. And then you have a level 2 risk over southern Michigan, northern Illinois, northern Indiana, and Ohio. So that's a slight risk. Coming down here just to look at the threats. I'm not going to focus on too much of the meteorology behind it, but they have the cold air aloft basically will favor hail production, and deep layer mean wind speeds will support fast moving storms capable of damaging winds. They do say that there could be a chance of a tornado risk for storms that move to the right of the mean wind. So that's a chance. Down in Oklahoma, they're talking about cells capable of hail, but coverage looks low and the aerial threat is low because of slow storm motions. So what we're going to do is take a look at the setup for both days. So what you see here is you can see a jet stream up through southeastern Canada into Minnesota. And then you can see another jet down here off of California coast coming into the coastline there. And then a relative minima, but still good flow through the Rockies. Down in Oklahoma, we have some 30 knots. And then up here, maybe around northern Illinois, southern Michigan, we have around 50 knots of flow at 10 to 12 kilometers above the ground. So the wind is much better up here than it is down over Oklahoma. As we move forward 3 hours to 4 p.m. Central Time, you can see we still have relatively weaker flow down here, 30, 35 knots in Oklahoma and Kansas and Texas. And you still have around 50, maybe even a 60 kind of near Grand Rapids there. So good flow up here for severe weather, good wind shear. So I'm not going to go through all the levels. I'm just going to go down to 850 to see how the low level flow is, which is where we look most of the time for tornadic potential. So as you can see here, you got really strong low level flow from the southwest up here in Michigan and Indiana. And then you have pretty good flow still. 35 is what more than sufficient for tornadic activity. One thing I do want to point out here is you can see this little extension down here in the pressure field down into Oklahoma. And as we go to the surface, you can see an extension of that with the temperature gradient. So if you look right here, you can see really warm air to the south of this boundary and then cool air with north winds behind it. So a well-defined cold front right here. Meanwhile, you have pretty good warm air up here in the region that was really highlighted by the SPC as a level 2. And then as we go forward to 7 p.m. So I want you to notice down in Kansas, Oklahoma, you can see that boundary shifts south with time. That's important because when boundaries, cold fronts are moving like that, they tend to undercut storms a lot. So that's important to notice. Doesn't mean you're not going to get severe storms still. You can still get really good severe storms there, but surface-based storms that are most likely for tornadic activity will be undercut most likely in this scenario. Okay, so the next thing I want to look at is how much instability we have. So I'm just going to look at the first one here, the max CAPE in the lowest 1 kilometer. So you can see you have this area of green all the way up into southern Michigan. Just to give you a reference point, The green is 750, which is more than sufficient for severe weather. And then you even have some higher levels of green, which get up around 1,000 to 1,250 right in northern Indiana at 0Z on Tuesday. Similarly, you have pretty good Cape down here, especially near Childress. You have a yellow, and getting up near 2,000 is what yellow is. So you have an area that's 1,500 to 2,000 right here in southwest Oklahoma, with up to 750 all the way to southeast Kansas, northeast Oklahoma border. And you can see the front really well in the instability, where north of it you have almost no instability, and then south of it you have pretty good instability right along the front, and then a bigger area down here in West Texas and Oklahoma. So the next thing I want to look at is the cap in place. So looking at here, you can see up here you don't have many colors in northern Indiana where we had that instability in southern Michigan. So that's indicative of a region that has no cap or is very weakly capped. So that's looking really good. Now, when we come down here into Oklahoma, this is likely why they only have a level 1 is because you have a lot of convective inhibition or a cap in place, warm air aloft, that keeps the storms from even forming in the first place. That being said, you may still get something right along this front, which is what they're highlighting. And if we go back 3 hours to 4 p.m., you can see the fronts up there, and you can see right along the front you have a minima. So that's kind of what they're looking at is you might get a storm right along that front, but I would expect that the front would undercut it fairly quickly. So the next thing we want to look at here, and I'll go to 4 p.m. again, and that is, do we have any precipitation? So this here is 3 hour accumulated precip. So what this is showing is how much precipitation has fallen in the previous 3 hours. So from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. And you can see you have some little light amounts right here in Illinois, and then you have more right here along that front that we were seeing in the other maps in Iowa and northern Missouri into Wisconsin and northern Michigan. This here is interesting. Not sure if that's just maybe light drizzle over the area or if that's maybe indicative of thunderstorms initiating around 4 p.m. As you see down in Oklahoma, there's nothing. So then we'll go forward 54 hours, which is 7 p.m. That's kind of interesting. You can see something has initiated in the eastern Texas Panhandle. If you go back to the SIN or the cap, you can see at this hour you did have no convective inhibition or no cap right there east of Amarillo. So you do have what appears to be a storm right where that -50 number is covering up, but it looks like you might have a white area under there where it's uncapped. But going back to the northeast up in Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, you can see we still have precipitation along the front. That area that I was interested in down here has kind of disappeared. We're going to go forward another 3 hours to 10 p.m. And I think this is where they're mainly focusing for the severe weather opportunities is as that front advances, you're going to get storms right along there, which with an advancing front, I would expect it to be more of a wind and maybe some hail, but less of a tornadic threat. So the next thing we're going to do is just jump forward one day. We're going to go back up to 300. So as you can see, here's what we looked at, and we're going to go forward to 4 p.m. on Wednesday. What you can see is this jet up here in the Great Lakes region has shifted much further east. And then you have a trough right here through Colorado and Wyoming that's pointing from northwest to southeast, so negative tilt to it. And then you have another trough up here with a strong jet behind it. You have some stronger flow coming in from New Mexico into western Kansas and northwest Oklahoma here. And then as we go down to 850, you can see there's this big area of stronger flow right over Oklahoma and Kansas and up to northwest Missouri. When you get into Iowa, you still have good flow, but it's now pointed to the southeast instead of from the south, southwest, or southerly flow. So that would be indicative of being north of a warm front or cold front or some boundary. So now going down to the surface, we're going to look at surface temp and wind. And you can see that that front that we saw before is not as well defined. It is still present. You can see the temperatures change drastically across it. But what I mean by not as prevalent is the winds to the south of it are now stronger than the winds that were to the north of it. If you recall yesterday, the winds to the north were pretty strong at like 20 knots, or up around 20 miles per hour, 20 to 25 miles per hour from the north. So that front was advancing. In this scenario with stronger winds to the south, the advancement of that front is at least stalled, if not advanced, retreating back to the north. And then we're going to look at our instability that we have available. Just to kind of give you an idea, we're going to go forward 3 hours to 7 p.m. Let me go back and also show you the 300 millibars. And you can see the jet is coming into western Oklahoma, that jet that we were looking at earlier. So instability at 4 p.m. As you can see, we have a big area over southern Oklahoma with instability values of 750 plus. You have another little pocket in southeast Kansas. And then you have even 500 basically between those two green areas in the darker gray in between. We go forward another 3 hours to 7 p.m. You can see that there's a pretty good green area, or 750 plus, even up to 1250 in central Oklahoma. And you can see that the boundary of instability to no instability has stayed relatively the same, or maybe even retreated to the north just a little bit. It looks like it's remained stationary, but in the area to the southeast of it, you've had an extension of better instability to the northeast. So the next thing we're going to look at is if we get any precipitation in this region. And what you can see, I'll go back 3 hours and show you before. I'll even go back to 1 p.m. You can see that there might be a little bit of precip, but then as you go forward, you can see storms starting to fire right here in west central Oklahoma. And then you can even see more back here, and you see some storms right here. So what you see here, this is a photograph. I'm going to cover this, but the fact that you see really strong change, or it's really long in this region, is good. And the fact that you see it go way over here means really strong flow aloft from the west-southwest. So that's favorable for supercells. So to conclude, I would say Tuesday up in the northeast, up by Indiana and Michigan, you have a good chance of strong winds, but you may also have some large hail and then an outside chance of a tornado embedded within maybe a squall line. But since it's an advancing front, I don't put a lot of high chances for tornadoes. I think it's going to be more of a wind and hail event. And then down in Oklahoma and western Texas, it looks like you may have an area of interest right along the Texas Panhandle Oklahoma border, right here where I'm kind of moving my cursor. And then on Wednesday, I think the Southern Plains has an opportunity for some good severe weather. Let's just go see if the SPC has any risk out for day 4. So day 4, they say predictability too low, so I'm guessing some of the other models look a little bit different from that model, but right now that's the model I would go by, given that we're still 3 to 4 days out from these events. As we get closer, we'll start looking at high resolution models that update rapidly. So it sounds like they do think there's going to be some storms that will develop along the frontal zone. However, the question becomes, what mode will they take? Are the storms going to be moving parallel to the front, which would be more favorable for upscale growth and turn into like a squall line? Or are they going to be moving off of the front toward the east and be able to roam freely as individual cells, not merging with others? And so they talk about discrete convection and a more robust severe threat. So when you have those isolated cells, that's when you have the greater severe opportunities. So Anyway, that's what we have. I would say the most disruptive weather potential is again Tuesday up in the southern Great Lakes region, and then Wednesday down in Oklahoma, Kansas, and northern Texas. Please stay tuned and subscribe so you get updates as we go forward through this week.